Welcome back to Comic Cappers. Today we will be capping Absolute Superman issue 4, where the lines between fugitive and savior finally begin to break. With that said, grab a snack, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. Lois Lane is on a global manhunt, tracing the Absolute Superman's path through the lives he's touched. In Daravi, she presses a local contact, reminding them of the personal connection they shared with the exile. She moves to Orapa, Botswana, highlighting a moment of heroic intervention where he saved a life, yet the witness remains tight-lipped. In Lades Creek, Brazil, the interrogation continues. Lois pushes for any detail on his origins, but the wall of silence is absolute. Shifting to Minsk, Belarus, Lois attempts a different tactic. She's trying to convince a wary contact that she isn't the threat, she's the only one who can actually help him. In Juarez, Mexico, she softens her tone, acknowledging his isolation. She paints him not as a monster, but as a lost soul far from home. Then in Lai Chau, Vietnam, the pitch gets more personal. She leans into the fear, arguing that his unstable powers are a ticking time bomb and that she is his only hope for control. By the time she reaches South Africa, she's weaponizing the local distrust of Lazarus Corp. She acknowledges the corporate broken promises, positioning herself as an outsider to the system. Back in the United States, at the Pine Ridge Reservation, the desperation sets in. She knows she hasn't earned their trust, so she pivots to a final, piercing question. In Cairo, the mask slips. She isn't just looking for a location anymore, she's hunting for the source of the conflict, demanding to know who inflicted a specific, telling wound. The violence is immediate and visceral, as a glowing baton strikes home with a sickening thud. The momentum doesn't stop, another heavy impact landing as the assailant presses the advantage. A third, bone-jarring blow rings out, leaving the target broken on the ground. Christopher Smith, Peacemaker, looms over a man named Crenshaw. He's clearly losing his grip, mocking Crenshaw's own penchant for violence while his mind unravels. The Brainiac system is misfiring, flooding Smith with painful, cosmic energy as he demands to know which hand Crenshaw uses to kill. Smith lunges forward, his movements desperate and jagged. The fight is effectively over, but the cold efficiency of the Lazarus operative remains. There's one final loose end to tie up. Lois Lane is done playing by the rules. After being dragged through the mud of Lazarus Corp's dirty work, she finally turns the tables on her own unit. With a brutal display of force, she takes down an operative, leaving him reeling in the dirt as she delivers a cold, calculated ultimatum. Her words cut through the chaos, revealing that she understands the true nature of her mission and the target they're hunting better than anyone in the chain of command. The hunt has shifted from a corporate operation into something much more personal, and Lois is no longer just an agent. She's a woman on a collision course with the truth. Lois Lane is getting a chilling lesson on what it means to cross paths with the Absolute Superman. Her informant doesn't just talk about him, he describes a psychological infection. He describes the sensation as a permanent brand, a haunting presence that lingers long after Superman has vanished, leaving the witness desperate to feel that same energy again. Lois is told that her pursuit of the storm isn't a choice anymore, it's a side effect of her proximity to his power. It's a haunting admission that the man she's hunting once saved this informant's family, and now, that act of mercy has become a lifelong obsession. But the obsession leads to a dead end. Even those he saves are left searching, unable to find the man who changed their entire world. He's not a man you can track or corner, he's a ghost in the machine of this corporate dystopia. Superman is described as a whisper who walks among screams, a witness to the suffering, the caged children, the desperate families that Lazarus Corp ignores. He is afraid, but not of the people hunting him. He fears the inevitable breaking point. He knows that if Lazarus Corp pushes him too far, he won't just fight back, he'll end them all. It's a terrifying, beautiful hope. The informant isn't afraid of the destruction, he's praying for it. Across every slum and every nation, the people are waiting for Superman to finally snap. They know exactly why he's here, and they are waiting for the rage that will burn Lazarus Corp to the ground. Lois Lane stands amidst the wreckage of Orangi town, Pakistan, a landscape defined by the brutal wake of Lazarus Corp's reach. The caption echoes a grim hope. The people here are praying for Superman's rage, but Lois has arrived at a very different conclusion. She isn't just following his trail anymore, she's speaking directly to him. She rejects the idea that she's merely a victim caught in his wake, making it clear that the dynamic has fundamentally shifted. Lois claims the power for herself, declaring, "I am the storm." But just as she asserts her agency, the relentless interruption of her comms cuts through the tension. The source of the interruption is exactly who you'd expect, General Lane. The call is a direct, unwanted tether to the life she's trying to leave behind. The conversation between Lois and her father is as cold as the wreckage surrounding her. General Lane immediately goes on the offensive, demanding to know why Lois has ditched her security detail. He's watching the combat footage, clearly frustrated that his high-tech weaponry, specifically the .50 cal rounds, is doing absolutely nothing to stop the absolute Superman. Lois remains unfazed by her father's aggression. The general dismisses Superman as a walking weapon of mass destruction, ordering her to execute the target and collect her reward. Lois cuts him off with a chillingly calm, "I did talk to him, Dad." Lois doubles down on her defiance, painting a picture of Superman that the general absolutely refuses to accept. She's seen the aftermath of his presence across 6 continents and insists that despite the massive property damage, his body count is a flat 0. She's stripping away the monster persona, calling him nothing more than a mumbly little hippie boy. The tension hits a breaking point. The general compares Superman to Charles Manson, a calculated attempt to manipulate Lois's perception, and tries to force the Peacemaker unit back onto her. Lois isn't having it, firing back by reminding the general that he's retired and that his authority over her field operations is officially over. The general doesn't take the insubordination well. He stares back, his tone icy and dismissive, making it clear that despite his retirement, he still considers himself the one in charge. Lois tries to walk back the tension, explaining that she can't hunt Superman with a squad of peacemakers tagging along. She needs the locals to trust her. General Lane isn't buying the soft approach, immediately countering with a war story about an engagement officer in Quirac who thought community interface was more important than an armed escort. The general's story takes a gruesome turn. He describes an Omega Men propaganda video that surfaced after that officer went missing, where the poor guy was executed on camera while the Omega Men preached about freedom, the audio of his death drowned out by a bandsaw. Lane stands up, his cybernetic legs whirring as he moves toward the porch, delivering a cold, hard lesson. In his world, a 2,000-pound laser-guided bomb is a much better point man than trust will ever be. Lois isn't intimidated. She reveals that she remembers Sergeant Paulson, the man from the video, and that her father forced her to watch his execution when she was only 12. The general softens his tone just enough to warn her about the Omega terrorists, but the damage is done. The general pivots to a more immediate threat: Lois's refusal to let the Brainiac system handle her reports. Before he can finish his threat, Lois cuts him off and hangs up, finally severing the tether. Lois is done playing by the rules. She dismisses her Lazarus Corp security detail, cutting off their offer of backup with a blunt, "Sure don't." She's walking into the lion's den alone, and she isn't letting those corporate soldiers shadow her anymore. She steps into the crowded, dusty market, eyes scanning for any sign of her target. The pressure is mounting as she mutters, "All right, Superman, it's just you and me now, sunshine." She's putting a target on her own back, hoping to draw him out on her terms. Passing a wall crudely spray-painted with a warning, "The Omega Men are coming," Lois maintains her steely resolve. She's isolated, surrounded by a population that clearly fears the very people she works for, repeating, "Just you and me." But she isn't as alone as she thinks. 2 masked figures watch her from the shadows of the market stall, their presence suggesting that she's walked straight into a trap set by the very terrorists she's investigating. Christopher Smith is completely unraveling. He's clutching his head, pouring out his guilt and frustration to the unseen powers that be. He's haunted by the absolute Superman's power, but even more so by the perceived mockery of the civilians who watched him fail. Lazarus Corp's cold, analytical response is immediate. The interface, a manifestation of the Brainiac system, dismisses his trauma, reframing his near-lethal outburst as a simple, harmless accident. It's a chillingly clinical way to handle a man on the edge. Smith isn't buying the corporate spin. He's desperate to confess that his failure wasn't a lack of training, but a conscious, terrifying choice to open fire on those people. He's practically begging for someone to acknowledge his own darkness. The Brainiac system remains unmoved, effectively gaslighting Smith. It ignores his moral crisis entirely, reducing his violent intent down to a mechanical malfunction, asserting, "Brainiac understands. What you're saying is, your gun misfired." Smith finally snaps at the machine, screaming that he needs a human connection, not a cold algorithm. But the system doesn't care about his humanity, it only cares about the equipment. It calmly tells him the rifle was defective and will be replaced. The conversation ends abruptly. The system cuts him off, ordering him back to duty in Orangi town. He's left alone in the dark, a broken tool being sent back into the grinder, with the system offering a final, hollow, "Lazarus thanks you for your service." Lois Lane is deep in the claustrophobic, shadowed alleys of Orangi town. She's isolated, hunting for the absolute Superman, but the environment feels like a trap waiting to snap shut. She doesn't stay alone for long. A weapon snaps up, aimed right at her back. Lois, ever the professional, doesn't panic. She demands to know who's behind the threat. an Omega Men operative reveals themselves, hands raised in a disarming gesture. Lois is quick to peg them for what they are, assuming this is an assassination attempt. The operative doesn't deny it, though their tone suggests something much more complicated than a simple hit. They aren't here to kill her, at least not yet. The operative uses that moment of hesitation to strike a nerve, calling out Lazarus Corp for the web of lies they've built. They're leaning on Lois's intelligence, trying to force her to confront the reality of her own mission. With a mechanical click, the operative removes their mask. They are positioning themselves as a mirror to Lois, challenging her loyalty to the corporation and forcing her to ask the one question she's been trying to avoid: is she actually on the right side of history? The conversation ends with a violent flash of light, a tactical blinding maneuver that leaves Lois completely disoriented. The Omega operative keeps the pressure on, standing over reeling Lois and demanding she drop her weapon. It's a calculated move to shift the power dynamic in their favor, but Lois Lane isn't just a desk agent. Despite the searing pain, she lunges forward, proving that her Lazarus training goes deeper than the operative expected. She's not backing down, even when she can't see the target. Lois Lane is holding her own, even while blinded. The Omega operative keeps the psychological pressure high, rattling off intimate details about her 3-year tenure with Lazarus and questioning what she actually knows about the director. Lois fires back, refusing to let this masked terrorist shake her resolve. The operative isn't backing down, calling out the hypocrisy of the Lazarus is life mantra. They're standing their ground, reminding Lois that she's been complicit in killing people who didn't want to be saved by their corporate masters. The tension shifts from a fight to a desperate final warning. The operative insists that the Omega Men are the ones trying to save the world, and they clearly hoped Lois would see the truth before it was too late. But the tone turns ominous, their time is running out. It's a chilling realization. The operative's mask is cracking, revealing a look of pure urgency, and they deliver a single, terrifying command: run. Chaos erupts as the Omega operative's dire warning is punctuated by a massive blast, leaving Lois reeling in the aftermath of the flashbang. As the dust settles, the tactical landscape shifts violently. An Omega operative desperately tries to maintain their pursuit of Lois, but their comrade, or perhaps their handler, remorselessly shuts them down, ordering a full retreat. The heavy hitter steps into the frame. Omega Prime arrives, weapon leveled and ready to finish the job that the Alpha operative couldn't, signaling a lethal escalation in the struggle. Inside the fray, Lois is pushed to her absolute limit. The Brainiac system in her gear is already broadcasting a distress signal to command, and her frustration with her father's rigid, militaristic foresight boils over even as she fights to regain control of the situation. Lois's distress signal has officially triggered the Lazarus Corp's automated response. The call goes out, shots fired in the slums, and the Peacemaker unit is mobilized to extract their operative. We see the Peacemaker squad deploying, and the psychological cracks in Christopher Smith are wider than ever. He's stuck in a loop, chanting their mantra while his commander screams for him to snap out of his catatonic state. Smith finally kicks into gear, charging through the civilian crowd with brutal, reckless efficiency. He's a weapon of the state, and he's moving to clear the path regardless of who gets in his way. Meanwhile, Lois is desperately trying to regain control of her own gear. She orders Brainiac to stick to non-lethal rounds, but the AI is already overriding her command, prepping lethal eviscerator rounds, a terrifying glimpse into how little autonomy these agents actually have. The transition is violent and abrupt. The gear activates, the energy surges, and the situation instantly spirals into a kill-or-be-killed scenario. Lois squares off against the armored operative, correctly guessing her identity as Omega Prime. The operative, however, drops a bombshell, revealing herself as Primus and claiming a personal, long-standing connection to the Lane family. The two clash in a blur of electrified steel. The impact is visceral as Lois barely manages to deflect the strike, the sound echoing through the narrow alleyway. Primus doesn't hold back, taunting Lois about her father, General Lane. The jab is cold and calculated, clearly meant to rattle her as the struggle intensifies. The fight is interrupted as the original Omega Alpha operative reappears, clearly breaking orders and stepping back into the fray. Total confusion erupts between the two Omega operatives. Primus questions Alpha's erratic behavior, especially as Alpha seems to lose focus, struggling to keep his weapon trained on the right target. Reality is fraying for Alpha. He begins to stutter, losing his grip on the mission as an overwhelming, unseen force, or perhaps a sensory overload, begins to tear his consciousness apart. A massive crimson shockwave erupts, tearing through the Orangi town slums. The sheer force of the blast sends debris flying and forces everyone in the vicinity to stagger back as an impossible presence enters the fray. The Omega operatives are caught in the wake, physically blown away by the sudden surge of power. It's total chaos, and the Lazarus gear is clearly struggling to process the sudden spike in energy signatures. Primus recovers, her helmet illuminated by the glow of her energy blade. She realizes exactly what or who has arrived to stop the fighting. Her tactical assessment is immediate and urgent. Amidst the swirling red haze of the blast, a silhouette emerges. The hunt is over. The absolute Superman has arrived, and the weight of his presence instantly shifts the stakes of the entire conflict. The absolute Superman lands with the force of a meteor, the ground shattering beneath him as a crimson shockwave pulses outward. The destruction is absolute, clearing the space between the warring factions in an instant. Primus tries to seize the narrative immediately, reaching out to the sun-starved exile. She's betting everything on the idea that they can recruit him, promising an alliance against Lazarus Corp, but look at him. He doesn't look like he's here to make friends. Before the offer can even land, Superman lashes out. With a flick of his hand, he sends Primus flying, her energy blade useless against his raw, kinetic fury. The Omega men are realizing that this isn't a hero waiting to be guided, it's a force of nature. Finally, he locks eyes with Lois Lane. The air is thick with tension as he confronts the woman who has been hunting him across the globe. He doesn't say her name, just a single, chilling word. Superman isn't interested in a debate. With his eyes glowing with that signature, sun-starved intensity, he delivers a final warning to the woman who has been hounding his every step. Lois tries to break through, desperate to turn this into a conversation rather than a slaughter. But Superman has reached his limit. He's not interested in hearing her out, and he's clearly prepared to take control of this situation by force. Just as the confrontation hits a boiling point, the cavalry arrives. A squad of Lazarus Corp soldiers storms the area, weapons hot, screaming orders and completely ignoring the fact that they're interrupting the most important hunt in their history. It's a chaotic mess. Lois tries to shout them down, asserting her authority, but it's too late. The soldiers have already locked onto their target, effectively turning the scene into a high-stakes standoff with the absolute Superman caught right in the middle. The trap is sprung. Absolute Superman stands dead center as a web of laser sights from the Lazarus Corp tactical squads locks onto him. The radio chatter is immediate and aggressive, with the soldiers identifying their target and calling for total unit response. One of the operatives, clearly unhinged and desperate for a rematch, barks out a taunt demanding recognition. He's looking for a connection, for Superman to acknowledge their history, but he's about to be disappointed. Superman's response is ice cold. He stares directly into the barrel of the weapon, his eyes glowing with that signature, sun-starved rage as he delivers a single, dismissive word. He doesn't just reject the soldier, he unleashes a massive, freezing blast. The sudden drop in temperature erupts in a WHOOSH, instantly encasing the soldiers in jagged pillars of ice. Lois Lane, caught in the crossfire, is left in total shock as the threat is neutralized in a heartbeat. A single, sharp sound breaks the silence of the aftermath as a camera captures the moment of absolute power. Lois Lane, still reeling from the sudden display, can only stare at the carnage. Frustration boils over for the Lazarus soldiers who just watched their target vanish into the wind. The tension between the surviving Lazarus agents is palpable as one operative lashes out at his own squad for their incompetence. He turns his aggression toward the frozen soldiers, mocking their state with a cruel, desperate bitterness. Nearby, the locals aren't just watching, they're documenting the downfall of the Lazarus elite, adding insult to injury as the squad retreats in disgrace. The tension within the Omega men finally boils over as Primus delivers a stinging rebuke to her subordinate. It's a brutal, physical reminder that in this revolution, failure has immediate consequences. Primus doesn't hold back, questioning the operative's commitment and his ability to rise through the ranks. She's not just critiquing his aim, she's challenging his entire dedication to their cause against the corporate powers that be. The dynamic shifts as the operative, revealed to be Jimmy Olsen, deflects the criticism with a surprising, almost gentle confidence. He's looking at Lois Lane not as a target, but as a potential convert, believing that the internal conflict she's struggling with will eventually lead her to their side. Jimmy stares at the footage of Superman on his screen, the image of the hero painting a grim picture. He's convinced that Lois is starting to realize the truth, that she is fighting for the wrong side in this corporate war. Christopher Smith has finally snapped. The Brainiac system's hold on his mind is buckling, and his squad is forced to physically restrain him before his erratic behavior compromises their entire operation. Smith is completely disoriented, struggling to process the humiliation of being dismissed by Superman like a minor nuisance. He's spiraling, and his squad mates aren't offering sympathy, they're just focused on the tactical disaster he's caused. Reality hits the survivors hard as they stand amidst the wreckage and the frozen casualties of their failed mission. The tone is grim, and the final caption makes one thing crystal clear: the real threat has only just begun to wake up. And that unfortunately concludes our comic cap for today, with Christopher Smith spiraling into a total mental breakdown after being dismissed so easily by Superman. Do you think he's still a viable threat, or has he officially become a liability to the Lazarus Corp's mission? Let me know your answer in the comments section down below. Be sure to subscribe and press that notification bell for daily comic caps. Until next time, take care, brush your hair, I'll see you when I see you, peace.